So yes, we're delighted to have Sister Denise back with us for another evening. No need for introduction. I'm sure everyone knows her. And the topic that came to mind for her was the one that we chose: how to turbocharge your spiritual progress.
Thank you so much. That is wonderful to be with you all. And I'm seeing really a very big group from many parts of the world. This is the wonder of COVID that has pushed us all into this Zoom way of communicating with each other. And I think that it is very much a symbol of this concept of turbocharging our spiritual practice. Turbocharge, I'm not really that much a mechanically minded person, but definitely I have some thoughts about how to bring our spiritual practice to another level, how to do it in a different way. And we generally tend to think of ourselves as being quite far away from our goal, and we make spiritual effort. We decide to sit for long meditations. We sit with ourselves to look at a kind of SWOT assessment of our progress, our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we do all of these things, and yet I think many people, and I've heard many people saying to me that my level of yoga is not as I think it should be. The depth of my understanding is maybe not as I think it should be. And what can I do to bring myself to where I think I should be? So we have this word should. And in our teachings, we have a lot of descriptions that tell us very clearly the signs of a person who is moving forward well. There was one very interesting message that came to me from Madhuban, which talked about our relationship with our task. And of course, our task, there are many tasks that we have, but overall, our real task is to carry myself from a stage of being spiritually depleted to spiritually empowered, from being relatively ignorant to fully knowledgeable, from a person who is using only the two physical eyes to one who is using the spiritual eye, the eye of the mind, also called the third eye. So we are looking at a vast chasm between how we are when we begin and how we are when we reach our final stage. And sometimes we become very aware that the finality of our spiritual practice is far, it's high, and sometimes you feel that really, I don't know if I could actually get to that point. And of course, we always hear that this practice, the humanity, everyone has a number, and we don't know what our number is, but there's number one at the very, very top, and then everybody else 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to several billions. And in that, where am I? So I think we need a few ways to look at ourselves, perhaps more positively. One of the things that is a reality is some people are looking at spirituality from a more religious angle. Some people are looking at it from a more philosophical angle, I could say. And I personally prefer to look at it from the philosophical angle because that's what I am. I'm really not a religious type of person at all. And but I am a thinker, so I was always much more attracted to spiritual philosophy than spiritual in a more religious way. And there are certain advantages that I have found from doing it like that. Um, just recently, I was with a group of people from Spain, a group of women, because the place where I am, I'm speaking to you from southern France, and it's only a couple of hours away from Barcelona, which is on close to the border with France by the Pyrenees Mountains. And in Spain, it is a Roman Catholic country, and the people approach spirituality from the background culture of Roman Catholicism. And one of the things that is there in the culture is that you're conscious, very conscious that you're a sinful soul and you need to become saved and purified, and if you deserve it, this will happen. If you work hard enough, this will happen. And people find that this background gives them a certain situation where they kind of almost sabotage their spiritual effort because in that background, people have come to feel that they have to feel guilty about their negative karma, and it tends to create an excess weight. And then I find that some people interpret this in such a way as to, in a way, almost prevent themselves from rising. And my background is not like that, although I come from a family where half of the people have a Catholic background and half of the people have a Protestant background. And the way that I grew up, this weight and this feeling of sinfulness and so on was absolutely not there at all. And I find that that helps me a great deal to give myself this chance to move forward spiritually. And so this is just something that I take advantage of from my background. Everybody has a background which has positive and negative in it. I think that in most cultures, there is a bias, which is a gender bias. And in spiritual practice, a lot of things come up. And the gender bias actually also comes up. And I think it's quite interesting to take a look at the gender bias and see how this impacts us. And I'm telling you this because to turbocharge our spiritual practice, we need to check in what way we are allowing ourselves to be held back, and in what way we have to deal with things that hold us back, that are really holding us back, and distinguish them from things that are not really holding us back, but it's just like a mindset that we have acquired through our conditioning, our social conditioning, our education, and all of this, because I feel that it plays quite a big role in all of this. So the message that I was listening to that came from our headquarters in Madhuban, I think you will find quite interesting. And this was an extract from the teachings, and it said like this, that if you want to undertake something, if you want to begin an important piece of work, you must establish yourself in the consciousness where you feel in your power, independent, and that you are not in any way positioning yourself in a sort of diminished way, in a way where you think you might not be able to make it, or you might not deserve it, or something like this. Because if your consciousness is like that, which was called ordinary consciousness, you will not make it. And if your consciousness is, I have a right to this, I deserve this, I am a free and independent person, I have all the rights, and let's go, then that really puts you in a much more empowered position. And I think many people, they may have heard this, but they may not have taken it on, they may not have taken it in, and they may kind of go back or revert to the mentality that is, in my opinion, something that's projected on you from childhood onwards. And as far as my research tells me, and my observation and my experience, many, many women are impacted by this gender bias, which takes the form of a certain type of conditioning which begins in childhood and which stays with you because it's so deeply entrenched that you just do not you just not realize how much you get limited by it. And on the other hand, it is also said that women tend to be better at spiritual practice than men. And so this comparison between men and women in this is kind of interesting, because sometimes in some forms of comparison, men are better off. In other forms of comparison, women are better off. But I think one very important part of spiritual practice is to consider the self to be a genderless spiritual being. And that's quite difficult because, of course, we are very much influenced by the body that we are in. And also, other people look at us according to our physical costume. And when we look at ourselves in the mirror, when we interact with each other, when we're not sitting in a classroom, there's the tendency to revert back to this this projected image that's projected by the society onto ourselves, and that we internalize, and we accept that sense of self that is projected onto us, and it is internalized very, very deeply. So, how do we deal with this? And I am talking about this because I think it makes a big difference in whether or not we can turbocharge our spiritual progress. So, the first thing to think about is I have the right to succeed. And this is a very interesting uh, little description of the self. I have the right to succeed. And one of the things that this is connected with is a description of the um, self respect or title of self respect. So, in our studies, we are told that there is such a thing as a title of self respect, which we need to take on board and internalize. And also, another thing connected with that, very important, is always sit on your seat of self respect. So take these three things together: your seat of self respect, your title of self respect, and your higher consciousness of being independent, a person who has rights, a person who is genderless, colorless, cultureless, beyond all these limitations. And we have to again and again adopt this position and to notice when I give away my power, when I'm not in my power, when I forget that this is the reality of me, then I will not be able to progress. So your stage of self-respect, consider it like this: I have a right to succeed. That is not a nice idea, that's a fact. And we need to take that on board. There's a fact. I have rights, and I have to assume those rights and assert those rights. I also have to understand and anticipate that there will be many circumstances, people who will try their best to prevent me from being in that consciousness, holding that consciousness, because it is a competitive environment. A competitive environment means this: in spiritual practice, there is a goal. And there are many, many people who are wishing to achieve that goal. But one of the things that gets in the way of that is this idea that all things are equal, all people are equal. Everybody has equal opportunity, equal rights, all of these things. It's a level playing field and so on. This is a nice idea, but it's not a reality. And so if you consider those things to be realities, then you will actually not be able to turbocharge your spiritual practice. You have to understand that there are many, many things and people and circumstances and all sorts of things which are specially designed to prevent you from getting there. So you need to have a relationship with obstacles. It is said in our spiritual practice and in our spiritual study, one of the titles of self-respect is you are a destroyer of obstacles. And then that's important to consider. This is my name. I am a destroyer of obstacles. Now, if I approach my task in ordinary consciousness and an obstacle comes along, I'll be blocked and I won't be able to move forward. That's the nature of ordinary consciousness. Higher consciousness, spiritual consciousness, the consciousness of being in my self-respect, using my titles of self-respect. I remember, I am a destroyer of obstacles. That means I have invoked obstacles. You see, you invoke obstacles, that means they will come. And you invoke an obstacle so that you can deal with it and destroy it. And why does the obstacle come? Very, very interesting reasons that I have found about. The obstacle comes to let you know where you are weak. And so if an obstacle comes and you are defeated by that obstacle because you're in ordinary consciousness, then you'll be stopped in your tracks and you won't be able to go forward, and you will kind of revert to a more, what I call, religious mode, where you start saying, oh, please God, help me, and things like that. And that means that you're approaching it from a diminished sense of self, and that you are forgetting that you have power, you have rights, and you have to play the shots, because the obstacles are coming to force you to come into your power. And of course, you are in a way in unknown territory. This is new. Maybe there are things happening that you don't expect, or you say this is unfair, it shouldn't be like this, why is it like this, I didn't think it would be like this, I didn't sign up for this. A few things like that may come into your mind, and that will knock you off your seat of self-respect and make you forget who you are. And so we have to notice and remember who you are. Remember who I am. I am the destroyer of obstacles. And that means I must acquire the skill to handle this obstacle, which is specially designed to let me know that I am weak in a certain area and I need to get my act together and get strong. So what happens? Obviously, an obstacle will come, you're defeated by the obstacle, so what do? You don't just give up. You pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and get going again. And you sit down with yourself and review what happened and really become clear by that analysis. You get to understand where you are weak, why you are weak, what you have done in your mind to put yourself in a weak position such that the obstacle can stop you and defeat you. Once you've seen it, then you understand your work, what you have to do, because you have to strengthen yourself in that area. What is the meaning of achieving our goal, and who are we competing against? We're not necessarily competing against each other. No, it's much deeper than that. We are competing against our shadow. Everybody has a bright side, everybody has a shadow side. That's the nature of a human being. And we have to embrace both sides. If we don't embrace both sides, then we're only a partial person. And we have to accept the totality of ourselves. That doesn't mean half of me is weak and half of me is strong. not like that. No. What it means is that if I avoid my dark side and don't acknowledge it and don't embrace it, I will stay weak. Whereas when I take the totality of myself and all of myself and come to terms with myself, then I can come into my power and move forward using the obstacles to strengthen me where I am weak, so that my dark side doesn't become an Achilles heel. It doesn't become the reason why I cannot move forward and I remain slow in the progress of my pilgrimage to my destination. I see. So, spiritual practice is done in the context of many people, in the context of our background, and so on, but also I am alone with myself and I am responsible to myself, and I am the one who has to live with myself forever. And I am the one who has my own stage of perfection, my own ideal condition, my original state of being, and I am the one who has moved away from it and become weak from strong, become corrupted from pure, all of these things. And what is spiritual practice after all? It is not that I am going somewhere very high and my normal state is not that high. No, that is not a good way to look at it. It's better to say spiritual practice is I am returning to my real self. I'm returning to my reality, my pure stage of consciousness, who I really am, what I really am, and it is a matter of transmutation, transfiguration. You may know these words from the world of Christianity, but it's really a very important stage where your everything that you are not falls away, and everything that you are is the reality that becomes more and more the totality of you. So being weak is what you are not. I see. So it's not about I'm weak, I'm trying to become strong. You'll never do it. No, I am essentially a very, very important part of spiritual practice. What you say to yourself, your inner self-talk, I am a pure, peaceful, powerful, blissful being of light, and I have a right to come to my fullness, and this is the time when I am called to do it, and I am alone in terms of other people. There are other people along the way, but these are not my support. My support system is the divine. My support system is the Supreme Being. Always remember, God plus one is fundamentally more powerful than negativity minus one. And so a higher consciousness means you position yourself with the Supreme Being with this thought that I have a right to be me, I have a right to stay in my self-respect, stay in my power, and I will do this and I will succeed. And I will not be discouraged by obstacles. So if you are discouraged by an obstacle, you stop moving forward. And the key in spiritual practice is not to be particularly concerned when you suffer a defeat. It happens that we don't tend to learn that much from our successes, but we do learn a lot more from our failures. So whenever there is a defeat or a failure or something like this, and you ask yourself, why? Why did this happen to me? Always, there are two answers to this. And remember this. This is really very useful to remember when you encounter this, because it can really make you feel kind of bad about yourself. But always remember, the purpose of this is to make me strong and to make me experienced, nothing else. Sometimes people say, oh, I failed and therefore it proves that I'm not going to make it, or I failed and therefore it proves that I'm not up for it, or I failed and therefore it proves that I should give up. This I call faulty logic. I failed and therefore it proves I'm getting experienced and it's strengthening me. That means you do not fall back into that ordinary consciousness by using faulty logic, but you hold yourself in the higher consciousness, in your power, using the logic that is taught to us by the Supreme Intelligence, who knows exactly what works and exactly what doesn't work. And this is why we are studying spirituality. And it involves a change of consciousness, a change of how we use our ideas, how we interpret what's happening, what has happened. And obviously, all the things that have happened in our lives that come up in spiritual practice to tell us, oh, you're no good, you can't make it, things like that. That's called old stuff, ordinary consciousness, faulty logic. It comes up, no doubt, but it comes up as an obstacle for you to get across it. And the process of getting across the obstacle is giving you more experience, more skill, and more confidence. Because once you do cross those obstacles, you can't go back. It's like once you really get that you are a pure, peaceful, powerful, loveful being of light, it doesn't matter what anyone says to tell you you're not, those statements no longer find a connection with your conditioning that was there to disempower you. You see what I mean? And it's, in a way, it's all psychological. And one of the advantages of approaching these things in what I call a more philosophical way is that you are much less susceptible to a kind of almost manipulation where people will say, well, you can't do this because you're too old, or because you're a woman, or because you're not educated, or because you don't know the language, or because all these different because, they're not real, you see. And you have to be able to say no. There is, I think, also a very interesting instrument that I would like to draw your attention to. And in the spiritual practice of Raj Yoga, there are 4 symbols that are given to us that let us know when we're really moving forward well. And one of them is to spin the cycle of self-realization. And spinning the cycle of self-realization is an assertion, this is what I am, and I am holding all aspects of myself from the most positive to the most negative. And when you spin all of that, what you get is a single color white, the color of purity. So no matter what, all the good and bad, mix it all together and you get the essence, which is pure. And this is a very good instrument to use, and it prevents you from going into like negative thinking about yourself, feeling depressed about yourself, this sort of thing. It cuts that stuff. It acts like a circular saw. Then another one is to use ideas which are real and which are true. That means the spiritual study is really going to help you, and you need to make sure that your words are based in truth and that they are of benefit. A third one, which is very important, is the lotus flower, which is the symbol of detachment. Always remember, you're an actor. There are scenes going on, situations that you come into. It's constantly arising, persisting for some time and falling away. And when those scenes come along, it is there to give you practice to be a detached and loving person. And in that, one very important element is to make a commitment to yourself. I will not suffer for any other person's negative karma. Like you will say, what do I mean by that? Well, it means that if somebody does something horrible to you, that's their negative karma. But if you internalize it and feel bad about it and get upset about it, then it means you're suffering for somebody else's negative karma. And you don't need to, it's totally optional. They can do something and you say, welcome to your karma. Have a nice day, because I'm nothing to do with it. I just move forward, being who I am, doing what I do, and I'm not going to take it as any reflection on myself. I'm certainly not going to suffer from it, but I have spiritual power getting accumulated. I will handle it. I will tolerate it. I will accommodate it. I will manage it because I'm strong. And so I'm not concerned, and I'm definitely not going to suffer. It's important to turbocharge your spiritual practice by doing this, because if you suffer for someone else's negative karma, it stops you, it slows you down, and then you have to get your energy up again, and it's not worth it. Remember, never suffer for someone else's negative karma. Then the fourth one, very interesting instrument, and that is the power to say no. In spiritual practice, we don't hear about this very much, but it is there. We usually hear that we must say yes, we must be nice, we must cooperate, we must allow everyone to be who they are, and all of that is true. But every so often, there is a game going on, and an obstacle will come, and what you have to do is judge and discern what the game is, what's going on, and be fully in your self-respect. Sit on your seat of self-respect and say no. End of story. You see, and then you don't get pulled into a game, pulled into a manipulation, pulled into a situation where someone can get you to move off of your seat of self-respect and make you feel bad about yourself, and you fall into old ways of maybe even being a victim, or allowing people to use and abuse you, or in some way put you at a disadvantage. And so to use the power to say no is really very important. And these instruments must be practiced. And if you are weak in any of these areas, then you will be tested. And so when the test comes, obviously you don't like it. And obviously you fail the test a few times, but that doesn't matter, because you will sit down with yourself and say, hey, self, what is going on here? I am allowing myself to be taken off my seat of self-respect. I'm allowing myself to be manipulated. I am betraying myself. Why am I doing this? No need. No need at all. Who am I? A pure, peaceful, powerful, loveful, blissful being of light, and I am with the Supreme Being, my guide, my teacher, my friend, and let's go towards my destination. And my destination is I become the ideal, the perfect me, which is there inside me, and it just needs to get activated by me paying attention to absorbing spiritual power from the source, the Supreme Being, and understanding what the spiritual knowledge is saying, and deeply. And then there really is this feeling of victory. And eventually, who are you competing against? You're competing against illusions, delusions, false ideas, and you become someone who is in contact with yourself, really integrated with yourself, and you say, this is me, and that's that. And then you're in your self-respect, your self-regard, and then your relationship with others is good, and you're in your power. And so I think that I have pretty close to used up all the time that you have given to me, but I would like to encourage you to think about your meditation practice in order for you to turbocharge your spiritual practice. The regularity and frequency of meditation is incredibly helpful. And there may be days when your meditation is good and you feel like you're really, in the zone and you're singing. And there may be other days where you just can't connect and you don't feel like it and all this sort of thing. But sit with yourself and think about spiritual material. It's not that meditation means that you just sit and all kinds of light comes dancing around you and then you say, oh, I had a good meditation. It's not really like that. Meditation means sit down and think about what's worth thinking about. And a lot of times what's worth thinking about is, how come I can't just lift off and get into a really nice meditation? And you can say to yourself, well, this is a time for you to really take some aspects of spiritual knowledge and think about it and try going deeper into it. And get your mind working on very positive, meaningful elements of the spiritual study. Because when you do that, it'll enable you quite well to move across any blocks that come along. And always remember, you can be a destroyer of obstacles, even that come in your meditation. And that is also for the purpose of strengthening you. And give yourself this time for meditation. I think another thing, maybe the last thing that I would encourage you to think about is balance. Because perfection is not some sort of extreme thing. Perfection is all about balance. Balance of your time, balance of your mind, balance of your activities, quiet time, social time, work time, fun time. Give yourself enough rest. Give yourself proper food at the proper time. Do not put yourself, like push yourself too hard with a view to turbocharging your spiritual practice by trying harder. It's better to just sit quiet with yourself and think about, am I in balance? And give yourself a break and try to feel the balance of all the different aspects of your life. And this will allow you to shift to a more subtle state of being, and that will also help you to turbocharge your spiritual practice. So, thank you very much, and Om Shanti. So I don't know if you have any questions, or if you would like to just sit for a minute and feel your soul. Feel the quality of your being. Notice your light. Affirm and assert, I am the light. I am with the light. I live in the truth. I have value. I am in my power. Always learning, always moving forward, shining, being. I am an independent, pure sovereign of the self. I am invisible, a beautiful vibration of love and peace, and I'm very happy that I am me. Om Shanti. Thank you very much.
You mentioned at the beginning about various approaches to the spiritual practice. You mentioned there's a religious approach, and the one for you is the philosophical approach. How can one know which approach best suits one? Plus, how would you understand Brahma Baba's approach to this spiritual practice? How would you describe that?
Oh, well, that's two very different questions. I think I think the most important thing of all is to really look at yourself and I think use your intuition to affirm who you are, because so often other people will position you and then you go along with that, and it may not be right, but nobody knows you like you know you, and you have to really trust that. And maybe people will say you have to do it like this, you have to feel like that, and na. And you say, well, but that doesn't quite suit me. So, okay, fair enough. Then you have to go with yourself and say, yeah, this is what I am, this is who I am. And trust that it's okay to be you. Nobody knows you as you do. Nobody feels you as you feel yourself. And you have a right to express yourself and state, yeah, this is my way. This is how I'm going to do this. And maybe others may say, no, that's not the best way. Okay, hear them out. But yet, whenever you really look into yourself and examine yourself, at least that happens to me, I always come back to the same conclusion. So I have faith in it because it always comes back to that one. Now, in terms of Brahma Baba was definitely a very religious person. He grew up in a very religious environment, and then he was also business, so he had, I think, both of those elements pushing on him. And I don't know, he was the instrument for the Supreme Being to speak and to talk to us. So I don't know, other than through the Murlis, how he was. And I think that what you get through the Murlis is that he was very much speaking to people who were in a religious mode of the approach to spirituality. And he was also very good businessman. So he was not at all airy-fairy by any means. He was absolutely down to earth. And I think that combination is very, very sound. And I think whether you approach spirituality in a religious way or in a philosophical way, it's still very valuable to have that down to earth, practical, realistic side of things, because we live in what we call the real world. So you have to deal with it. And you can approach it from any angle, but I think that you need to really know yourself and understand that your approach is just as valid as another approach, and that you cannot be the same as Brahma Baba in the sense that you have your own background, your own culture, and you are working with your relationship with Brahma Baba, but you have to take into account all things. Otherwise, you will find yourself denying a very relevant and important side of yourself and making yourself into something a little bit artificial, which ultimately won't work. So I think the idea of being real, the idea of being authentic, being true to yourself, studying this and going along this path that Brahma Baba, cut the path with his machete, and we are going along it. But each one of us has to go along our own way.
Yeah. So let me look at the chat box, and somebody asks, what if obstacles are coming from the inside, such as health issues? How to overcome them?
Well, all obstacles are valid. There's no obstacle that we say, well, that shouldn't be there. We always say they shouldn't be there. But okay, you have a health issue, that means that is your exam. And so you have to deal with it. I think as you get older anyway, there's going to be health issues because your body is made of impure matter and you inherit certain weaknesses from your parents. I'm very lucky I have no health issues. There was a time when I did have a health issue, but it's gone. And so that's good. And even when COVID came along, it attacked me very lightly, and I'm fine. So that's great. But I do remember a time when I had very, very intense physical pain for a long, long period of time. And so I had to deal with it. And eventually I found that I was dealing with pain in like an antagonistic way, trying to overcome the pain and make it go away and all that sort of thing. And of course, the medical people were giving painkillers and whatnot, which were not working. And I thought one day, these painkillers are going to make me into a painkiller addict. Is that what I want? And I said, no, that's not what I want. So then I said to myself, I have these conversations with myself, okay, you're going to have to set aside all pain medication and handle this with nothing, just yourself. And I experimented and discovered that what I needed to do was surrender to the pain. And in that, I discovered that the pain was an incredible teacher. And I think from this experience of mine, I can't be certain, but I think that when a person has an exam in the form of a health issue, it is a teaching to teach you something very important about yourself. And then when it has communicated its message adequately, then you pass that test and it goes away, and then another test comes along. Because in spiritual practice, this is a study, which means you're under continuous assessment, and there's going to be all kinds of tests. And we said to ourselves, okay, I choose to do this, and I choose the level at which I think I can do it, and then correspondingly come the exams. And I think also the exams encourage us to maybe go to a higher level than maybe we initially thought we might do. And so everything is meaningful, everything has a purpose, and it's up to us to work with it. And I have seen, incredible, powerful yogis dealing with big illnesses, and they did transcend matter, and they did show that they could get through it. So it means it's doable. It's not necessarily easy, but it is doable.
So there's another one about the correlation between karma and the obstacles that you are facing. What's the correlation between those?
Yeah, that's, I think, a really interesting question. With the philosophy of karma, the usual way in which most people interpret it, they say that whatever this karma suffering is that I have to bear, it means that I did something negative and now I have to suffer for it, and I have to pay my karma. So that's one angle of approach. But I tend to not use that angle of approach because I feel that it causes an individual to diminish themselves, move away from being in their power, and start feeling like a punishment is going on, which is a little bit, in my feeling, the more the religious approach to it. So I have a policy of considering these karmic accounts to be settled as tests. And then I have to finish the karma, pay it in whatever way it requires, but also use it to my advantage so that I learn stuff from it and that the test paper really carries me forward, makes me more experienced, more strong, more wise. I just really have this policy that I must take advantage of everything that comes down the path to me, because otherwise, I'm not going to get to the end. You see, taking it negatively means it slows you down or stops you, and so I have this policy because of that.
Are we supposed to work with our backgrounds, or are we supposed to just renounce them and surrender entirely to the new Baba's philosophy?
Well, again, that's a question. I'm not quite sure exactly what you mean by that. You have a context. Everybody has a context, and you have to understand that your context is the environment in which you do your spiritual practice. And then you have to interpret what Baba is saying in such a way that you are moving forward, and everybody has a context. Of course, the essence of the Murlis is the context of the part of India that is now Pakistan, and then they moved to India and they moved through the Second World War and they moved through the War of Partition. They moved through India very poor to India now quite wealthy. And they moved from, well, the context is Hindu bhakti. And if you are in that context, then there it is. But a lot of us are not in that context. So we have to um, see how it applies in our context. We have to interpret it and see that it does apply, but we have to work with it definitely, as he said, so that we can arrive at our destination. But renouncing it, it doesn't mean pretending it doesn't exist or denying it. That's not the way to do spiritual practice. No.
Do the same obstacles keep on coming as long as we have not had the power to overcome them?
That definitely the same obstacles will keep coming because the weakness that you have that they are drawing your attention to is a deep one, and you need time to understand it well, and you need a lot of different types of opportunities given by similar obstacles to actually understand it and get beyond it. And it's not really, I wouldn't use the word overcome the obstacle. The obstacle is your friend and it's telling you something. So you do need to understand its message, and you do need to capture from it what it's trying to tell you about how you operate and what you're doing and how you're interpreting things so that you get it. And that is the beauty of the obstacles. And when you do get it, then you're called a destroyer of obstacles because you've gone past it.
You mentioned about the dark side.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody asks, why can't we come to terms with our darker side, especially knowing that we are returning to our original state?
Well, you can't return to your original state unless you come to terms with your dark side. So, it's not about denying it, as so many people think that you go to your perfect state and all the darkness has disappeared. No, not at all. Um, the perfect state is balance. which means you have come to terms with your dark side. And when you spin the cycle with all the shades of dark and light, what you get is pure light. And so that's how it is. So many people, they say, "Oh, I've got to not have a dark side. I've got to be perfect." That's perfectionism. That will get you into trouble. So better to use the word return to my original condition, get myself powered, get myself purified, because there's a lot of negativity that got mixed into the soul. So you want to let that be purged from you and get out, or get all of your monsters to come and face you and deal with them. You know, you can use all sorts of mythological angles on that. And understand you are essentially pure, peaceful, loving, blissful, powerful being of light. And like the moon, you go from full to empty, empty to full, and that's how it is. And it's a full acceptance of the totality of the self. And this is what brings you into your power.
I think we
Okay.
do need to wind up here.
All right. All right. Yes. Yes.
Really, you've given us a very wide-ranging set of thoughts and ideas and tips to practice to really turbocharge our spiritual practice. So big thanks to you for your time and energy.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks to everybody for being here. And it's been a great delight. And Om Shanti.